Bradley sat at the edge of the observation deck, eyes fixed not on the stars, but on the chair, the one no one ever touched. The chair at the far end of the council chamber, carved from obsidian, polished to a perfect mirror. It hadn't moved. In decades. It was the only seat without a sigil, without a flag, without a voice. No one dared to ask why. Not until now. You're not supposed to be watching this. Not in the way people aren't supposed to see a dying star explode from this. Close or hear the last breath of someone who vanished from all official records. And yet here you are, with the file open, the recording blinking red, as if something wants you to know, but only you. It started when Bradley heard a voice that didn't belong in his comlink. It wasn't static. It wasn't interference. It was a whisper. Human, old female, speaking a name no human had spoken in 5 centuries. Eleanor. No title, just that. A name swallowed by time, redacted from every Earth archive, spoken now as if in mourning or warning. Seconds later, Bradley was gone, vanished. Not dead, not transferred, not missing, gone. And no one ever said his name again, as if he'd never lived. Only the chair remembered. This is where the story breaks open like a rib cage, and you start to see what's been hidden beneath the bones of everything you thought you knew about humanity's place in the galaxy. The strongest species, the Virek, the Ashtari, the mineral-blooded Jarelians, they all sit above us in the hierarchy. They've earned it, through wars, through intellect, through a kind of beauty so alien it scars the mind. And yet, the humans still come last. Always last, not by force, not by law, but by some unspoken, unbreakable rule. That's the question no one dares to ask, isn't it? Why, not how, humans survived, not why they expanded, not what makes them adaptable or strange or gifted. The question they fear is why the humans chose to sit last. Chose, as in willingly, as if they know something the rest of the galaxy doesn't. As if they remember something the others forgot. And now there's a baby. A girl born on Alara's second moon, to parents who'd never heard of Earth. She spoke her first word last week, not mama, not dada. She looked straight into the ship's emergency broadcast terminal and whispered a phrase in a dead Earth dialect no one taught her. The chair is waking up. The broadcast light turned on by itself. The obsidian chair is no longer empty, and I think Bradley is still alive. But he's not Bradley anymore, and neither are we. The moment the broadcast light flickered on by itself, everything inside Bradley shattered, fractured like a mirror left out in the rain, each shard reflecting, a version of reality too slippery to hold. You'd think that seeing a chair wake up would be enough to break someone, but no. What broke him was the silence that followed, thicker and colder than the void beyond the chamber's glass walls. He reached for the comlink, fingers trembling, as if the device itself was alive, buzzing with a low, almost sentient hum that clawed at the edges of his sanity. But the channel was dead. No static, no voice, just a hollow void. And then came the doubt. Was that voice he heard, Eleanor's voice? A real fragment from some lost past? Or a glitch seeded by something inside his own mind? Because the more he tried to piece it together, the more fragments slipped through his fingers like dust. Memories didn't line up. Names disappeared from his journals. Events he was sure had happened were suddenly absent from the official logs. His own face, the reflection of the obsidian chair, seemed to blink once, twice, and then was gone. Not physically, but in some way deeper. Like the very essence of Bradley had been peeled away and replaced with a hollow echo. He wasn't alone in this. There was Mara. She came out of nowhere, or maybe she'd always been there, just hidden. In the cracks of his memory, her presence was a contradiction, soothing and unsettling, familiar but impossibly strange. Mara spoke in riddles, her words half-truths tangled with sharp-edged lies. "They don't want you to remember," she said once, eyes flickering with something like fear. Or was it madness? She pulled out a data shard, cracked and flickering, and fed him recordings that distorted before his eyes. A meeting with the council that he had never attended, conversations about humanity's role in the galaxy that contradicted everything he'd been told. One file showed Bradley sitting in the forbidden chair, speaking calmly about humanity's burden, while another erased that moment entirely, replacing it with static and a whisper, "Forget." It was impossible to tell what was real anymore. His mind tangled with the thread of paranoia. Was he breaking down under pressure, or was something more sinister pulling at the strings? The room's edges seemed to pulse, the obsidian chair casting shadows that writhed just beyond his sight. He heard sounds, the faintest clicks, the breath of someone behind the walls. But every time he turned, the space was empty. His own heartbeat became a deafening drum, threatening to drown out whatever truth lay hidden beneath. Mara's presence grew heavier, like a weight pressing into the marrow of his bones. She insisted that the real unsolved mystery wasn't the chair itself, but what it represented, the secret humanity carried across the stars, the truth behind what no one tells you about why humans sat last, and why they had to. "They erased it," Mara whispered one night, voice trembling, "because it's a truth so dangerous it could unravel everything. What they don't want you to remember is not about power, not about strength. It's about sacrifice, and a debt paid in silence." Bradley's memories blurred. He remembered Eleanor's voice, but was it a warning or a curse? Was he hearing echoes of his own fractured mind, or fragments of a cosmic truth too heavy for one man to bear? The more he tried to hold on to his identity, the more it slipped into the shadows. Mara's stories seemed to shift, sometimes reassuring, sometimes threatening. She claimed to know the chair's history, how it watched over the galaxy's strongest species, how it waited for the one who could finally understand the burden humanity carried, until Bradley began to suspect that Mara herself might be a phantom conjured by his unraveling mind. The real terror wasn't the chair waking. It was that Bradley might never wake up again, because in this vast, cold galaxy, some secrets aren't buried. They're locked away inside your own mind, waiting to bleed through the cracks in reality. And when they do, you start to wonder if the monsters aren't out there, but inside you, and the chair, still waiting. Bradley's breath caught the moment the data shard hummed to life in his trembling hands. A low pulse, steady and sure, like a heartbeat syncing with his own. For the first time in endless cycles of doubt and fractured memory, something solid emerged from the haze. The recording wasn't just a fragment anymore. It was a key, a thread he could pull to unravel the knot that had strangled his mind since Eleanor's whispered name vanished into the void. The hidden truth he'd chased like a ghost through corrupted files and shattered conversations was finally within reach. He pressed play, eyes glued to the flickering holographic screen, as a long-forgotten council meeting unfolded before him in pristine clarity. Voices debated with solemn weight, not about war or diplomacy, but about a singular, harrowing truth. No one had dared to vocalize for centuries. Humanity, they said, wasn't last because they were weak, or because they lacked power. They sat last by choice, a pact born from a sacrifice so profound it erased itself from history. The chair, Bradley's chair, was a symbol, a sentinel marking that sacrifice. The strongest species had been granted a place above because humans had taken a burden so terrible that even the weight of memory threatened to crush the galaxy. The recording concluded with a chilling phrase. They chose to carry the silence, so others wouldn't have to bleed. Relief surged through Bradley like a cold wave washing away months of suffocating confusion. The mystery uncovered at last. He wasn't losing his mind. He wasn't broken. "You're not crazy." They lied. "Do you?" Mara had said in one of her clearer moments. Now it was all there, the hidden truth unmasked and undeniable. For a moment the oppressive darkness loosened its grip. But as the last echoes of the council faded, the screen flickered. The image blurred, twisted into a different scene. One Bradley didn't recognize, but something deep in his chest twisted with uneasy familiarity. A child standing alone in a dimly lit room, whispering into the shadows a name that chilled him to his core. The same name Eleanor had spoken, The camera shifted to a man who looked eerily like Bradley, but younger, eyes wide with terror. He reached out, mouth moving silently as if trying to stop something no one else could see. A memory glitch? Or a message from the past? Bradley's fingers trembled as the scene warped again, the walls melting into the faded contours of his childhood home, a place he hadn't remembered in years. The same silence that had haunted the observation deck seeped into the room, thick and suffocating. His mother's voice echoed faintly, overlapping with a mechanical hiss he'd never heard before, a static-filled whisper repeating a phrase that lodged itself in his mind. The chair watches. The chair waits. That night, long ago, a friend had vanished. No explanations, no searches, just a blank space where memories should have been. Bradley's mind tried to close the door on that day, but now it clawed back with a vengeance, a raw nerve uncovered. The parallel was unmistakable. The past was bleeding into the present, and the terror he'd buried was resurfacing with a venomous bite. Suddenly, Mara was gone. Not physically. Her presence dissipated like smoke in the air, leaving behind a chilling void. And in that silence, Bradley felt it. A force watching him from the shadows of his own mind, relentless and patient. It was neither enemy nor ally, but something more primal, more intimate, a weight pressing down on his thoughts, fracturing reality around him. It had been here all along, lurking beneath the surface, waiting for him to unravel the truth. No name. No face. Only the cold certainty that this presence thrived on doubt, feeding on the very fractures in his memory. The chair wasn't just a symbol of sacrifice. It was a beacon, a warning, a cage. Bradley's heartbeat thundered as the room darkened, the edges of his vision warping, folding into themselves like a memory loop stuck on rewind. The question he'd feared all along echoed louder now, hammering at the walls of his mind. Had he ever truly been the one in control? Or had he been a part of something far larger? Something that had been orchestrating his every step from the beginning? The screen went black. The last whisper faded into silence, and suddenly you realize you've been watching the wrong story all along. Every detail, every moment, every truth was a fragment of a greater puzzle that's still missing its final piece. The chair waits. The silence deepens. And Bradley may never find the peace he craves, because the mystery isn't just out there in the stars. It's inside your head. And now, you'll want to watch it again. The first time the messages appeared, Bradley thought his mind was fracturing beyond repair. But no, they weren't hallucinations or the last gasps of a fading sanity. They were deliberate, hidden within the static, threaded through the code of corrupted files, slipping beneath the surface of his dreams like whispered secrets meant only for him. And then, slowly, he realized he wasn't alone. The signs were subtle at first, a pattern in the flickering of the chair's interface, a series of symbols sketched in a margin of a forgotten report, a sequence of numbers that appeared on screens long thought decommissioned, like a secret language scattered through the void, waiting to be decoded. Others were watching too. Quietly, patiently. From the shadows of their own fractured realities, they reached out in ways that felt impossibly intimate, yet chillingly detached. As if the line between observer and participant had blurred beyond recognition. There were shared dreams where faces appeared, none of them fully remembered, none of them named, but their eyes held the same haunted question. Their voices, fragments caught on found footage from 20 years ago, whispered warnings the government never released, coded confessions that refused to be buried by time or silence. Bradley's own identity began to dissolve under the weight of all. Who was he in this unfolding conspiracy? A pawn, a witness, or something more? A fragment of a larger design orchestrated by a force so vast and patient that it could rewrite memories, bend perception, and erase truths until only a single, unsettling question remained. What did it mean to be human when your very thoughts were no longer your own? The chair was not just a relic or a symbol. It was a beacon in a labyrinth of control. a nexus where reality warped, and the boundaries between self and other cracked open to reveal something darker, something ancient. From this tangled web of perception emerged a third voice, an observer, who claimed to see the truth with a clarity that cut through the fog like a blade. They spoke not as an ally, nor an enemy, but as a witness to the fractures that Bradley and the others could barely perceive. Their messages arrived encrypted but raw, drenched in urgency and despair, urging Bradley, and by extension you, to question everything, every memory, every moment, every whisper that seemed familiar, but out of place. You were right all along, they said, but the truth is bigger than any of us can hold. Their presence was a constant shadow, an unblinking eye watching from the periphery, refusing to be ignored or silenced. The deeper Bradley delved into the coded transmissions, the more the layers of the conspiracy peeled away, revealing a network of watchers and watched, of memories manufactured and erased, of identities shattered and reconstructed like fragile glass sculptures doomed to shatter with the slightest touch. The messages suggested a game played over decades, a slow unveiling of truths withheld from the public eye, truths that tethered humanity's fate to the silent promise of sacrifice and the cold gaze of the chair. And still, the symbols kept appearing, etched in the walls of abandoned stations, whispered through static bursts on forgotten frequencies, folded into the cracks of Bradley's waking nightmares. They formed a map, or perhaps a warning, an invitation to step further into a story that was never meant to be told aloud. Each fragment of communication, each distorted memory, tightened the knot of dread and fascination that held Bradley. And, now you, spellbound. The line between hunter and hunted blurred, and the question hung heavy in the air. Who was truly in control, and who was merely a reflection trapped in the chair's endless gaze? The night deepened, the silence thickened, and somewhere just beyond the reach of reason, the watcher waited, patient, unyielding, and ever-present. The story was far from over. In fact, it was only just beginning, and now the real question remains. Will you watch closely enough to see the truth before it's too late? Bradley stood alone on the edge of the observation deck, the void stretching endlessly before him like a mirror reflecting every fractured piece of his soul. The weight of the chair beneath him no longer felt like a seat of power or sacrifice. It was a crucible, a place where the raw truth burned through the layers of memory, identity, and fear that had wrapped around him like chains. For years he had chased answers, hunted shadows, peeled back illusions, only to discover that the mystery wasn't what had happened to humanity, but why it had happened. Why the strongest species had placed humans last. Why silence had become a language more powerful than words. Why the burden of truth was a currency few could afford to bear. He realized then, with a cold clarity that both terrified and liberated him, that this wasn't a story about power or conquest. It was about the essence of being human, fragile, flawed, yet resilient enough to carry a weight no other species dared to shoulder. The silence wasn't emptiness. It was the echo of every choice made in fear, hope, love, and loss. It was the vast unspoken truth of sacrifice, the price paid for the chance to be free in a universe that demanded conformity, obedience, and forgetfulness. But with understanding came a shattering vulnerability. Bradley's hands trembled as memories flooded in. Memories not his own, but stitched into his mind like a second skin. Faces of loved ones lost, moments of laughter that twisted into screams, a whispered confession from Mara that cut deeper than any blade. We are not free, Bradley. We're prisoners of the stories we refuse to let go. The chair wasn't a symbol of freedom. It was a cage forged from the collective silence, a place where the truth lived, waiting to either save them or destroy them, depending on the lens through which they chose to see it. He faced a choice that felt irreversible, a moment where the line between salvation and ruin blurred into a haunting question. Could he accept the unbearable truth and still hold on to his humanity? Or would the weight of knowing shatter him beyond repair, leaving only an echo of what he once was? The air around him seemed to thicken, reality folding inward as if the universe itself was holding its breath. Bradley's voice broke the silence, barely more than a whisper carried on a cold wind. Maybe the truth isn't something to be found. Maybe it's something we carry, something that defines us even when we try to forget. The chair beneath him hummed softly, a reminder that some burdens were not meant to be dropped, but borne with quiet dignity, even as they threatened to consume the soul. In that moment, the story ceased to be about secrets or conspiracies. It became a reflection of the human condition, how the greatest strength can arise not from dominion over others, but from the courage to sit last, to endure, the silence to carry the unseen scars with grace. The mystery had transformed into a terrifying awakening, a dream from which there was no easy escape, only the choice to face what lies beyond the veil of forgetfulness. And as the stars stretched endlessly across the void, Bradley's final thought echoed softly in the stillness, a poetic lament that would linger long after the screen faded to black. We are the silence they feared. We are the last story told in a universe too afraid to listen. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for stories you were never meant to hear. Until next time, remember, some truths don't want to be found.